If you're stuck at a step 1 score plateau, the problem might not be that you need more facts. It might be that you're reading NBME questions like UWorld questions, and that is a huge mistake. UWorld and NBME can test the same content, but they test very different cognitive skills. Once you understand that difference, NBME questions start to feel a lot less vague, and your review becomes way more useful. Hi, I'm Michael, the founder of the MDSteps platform. I posted about this exact topic on Reddit back in December, but we're going to go over it again in today's video. I want to explain the difference between learning and testing, why UWorld trains one skill, why NBME rewards another, and how to switch into the right mode before your real exam. Let's start with UWorld. UWorld rewards flexibility. When you're doing a UWorld question, you're encouraged to stay open. You chase mechanisms. You hold multiple diagnoses in your head at the same time. You let a lab value, a physical exam finding, or even the last sentence completely flip your answer. And honestly, that's why UWorld is so good for learning medicine. The explanations are long because they're teaching you how diseases work. They're teaching you how to compare similar conditions, how to reason through mechanisms, and how to understand why one answer is better than another. In UWorld, second guessing can actually save you. You might start with one diagnosis, then catch a detail near the end that pushes you toward another. That process is useful when you're building knowledge. But here's the problem. That same habit can hurt you on NBME. NBME questions usually work differently. NBME does not reward you for keeping 5 possibilities open until the final sentence. In fact, NBME often punishes that behavior. Most NBME questions are decided early, sometimes within the first 2 or 3 lines. The key information is usually right at the front. The patient's age, the acuity, is this acute or chronic? The setting, are we in the emergency department, clinic, post-op floor, or ICU? And which system is being stressed? Once that frame is set, most of the remaining information is not there to completely redirect you. It's confirmatory. It's there to support the frame that was already established. So the real question is not always, what new diagnosis does this next detail suggest? The better question is, does this new detail actually change the category I already committed to? Most of the time, it does not. This is why NBME feels vague to a lot of students. It's not necessarily vague, it's front-loaded. If you miss the early signal, the rest of the question feels unhelpful. You keep waiting for the question to give you the one obvious clue, the one lab value, the one final sentence that makes everything click. But NBME often already gave you the important information at the beginning. The rest of the stem is just padding, or confirmation, or one close distractor. And if you're used to UWorld, you may keep reinterpreting every new piece of information. You read a symptom and reopen the diagnosis. You read a lab and reopen the diagnosis. You read the final sentence and reopen the diagnosis again. That is UWorld mode. And on NBME, that can lead you away from the answer that was already there. This becomes really obvious during review. When you miss an NBME question, most students ask, what lab did I misinterpret? What fact did I not know? What detail did I miss? And yes, sometimes you really did miss a fact, but a lot of the time, that is not the main issue. Instead, ask yourself, when was this question already decided? What line should have made me commit? What frame should I have locked onto early? For a lot of NBME misses, the answer is before the labs even appeared, before the imaging, before the final sentence. Sometimes the category of the question was already clear by line 2 or 3. And if you needed the lab values, imaging, or last sentence just to figure out what category you were in, you were probably still reading the question like UWorld. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Late NBME score jumps usually do not come from learning a massive amount of new content. They often come from changing how you read. They come from practicing early commitment. And that feels uncomfortable because early commitment means you might be wrong. But NBME is testing whether you can quickly recognize the correct framework, commit to it, and stop reopening the diagnosis with every extra detail. That means you need to be able to say, I know what category this is. I know what system is being tested. I know what disease class I'm in. Now I'm just reading the rest to confirm or rule out one close distractor. That is a very different skill from UWorld-style learning. So here's the distinction. UWorld mode is stay open, think through mechanisms, hold multiple diagnoses, let late information change your mind, read the explanation deeply, use the question to learn medicine. NBME mode is frame the question early, identify the category quickly, commit by the first few lines when possible, use the rest of the stem to confirm, let extra information be extra. That does not mean you ignore the rest of the question. It means you stop treating every detail as equally important, because on NBME, not every sentence is meant to change your answer. Some sentences are just there to reassure the right frame. This is also important for the real exam. Step 1 tends to read much closer to NBME than to UWorld in structure. The stems are often shorter. The signal is often early. Then you get some padding. It is usually not trying to trick you late in the same way UWorld might. Compared to UWorld, Step 1 does not reward you for holding 5 mechanisms in your head until the end of the question. Compared to NBME, the real exam may feel a little less stripped down, but the decision point is still often early. So the best way to use your resources is this. Use UWorld to build the frames. Use UWorld to learn the mechanisms. Use UWorld to understand why diseases look different from each other. But once you start doing NBME-style review, switch gears. Read step questions like NBME questions. Decide the category by line 2 or 3 when possible. Then use the rest of the question only to confirm or rule out one close distractor. Here's a practical exercise you can try immediately. Go back through your last NBME. For every question you missed, do not just read the explanation and move on. Instead, mark the exact line where the question was already decided. Ask yourself, where was the age clue? Where was the acuity clue? Where was the setting clue? Where did the system become obvious? Where should I have committed? You will probably notice a pattern. A lot of your misses were not because you had no idea what was going on. They were because you failed to commit early enough. Or you committed correctly, then talked yourself out of it. That exercise alone can change how you read your next NBME. So the big takeaway is this. UWorld and NBME are not just different question banks. They train different behaviors. UWorld is for building knowledge, mechanisms, and flexibility. NBME is for testing recognition, framing, and early commitment. If you are reading NBME questions like UWorld questions, you may be making the exam harder than it needs to be. So use UWorld to build your frameworks. Then practice NBME questions by locking onto the early signal, committing to the category, and letting extra information be extra. That is the mental shift that often unlocks the plateau near the end of prep. If this helped, go back to your last NBME and try the decision line exercise. Mark the exact line where each missed question was already decided. You may be surprised how often the answer was there before the labs even showed up. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. I know this video ran a little long, but the information's important. If you found this useful, subscribe for more Step 1 strategy videos that focus not just on what to study, but how to think during the exam. And remember, at MDSteps, we focus on the clinical reasoning repair tools you'll need to break through an NBME plateau or score drop. That's what we do. For more information, visit mdsteps.com.